What is going on, everybody? Welcome to Wrestling with Whiskey Weekly, the show that is supposed to go on. And you know what? With whiskey, just like in entertainment, the show must go on because, ladies and gentlemen, we were scheduled to have a guest today, the co-founder and head distiller of 18 Distilling, to talk about their District Made lineup as well as the latest in the Untitled series. But they're not here. And I have been given no notification or explanation as to why that has happened. I'm hoping everything is okay and there's no emergency situations and stuff happen for sure. Here, let me put a little music in the background. Damn it, I wish I could just put there we go. Yeah, so I sent the link, I sent the Zoom link, all this stuff. And I'm looking at I got the meeting. I run this through the Zoom app and I bring it into the stream here, and they're not here. I've sent the email. Yeah, I don't know if we got they're in Eastern, we're in Central, but the Zoom link invite did say 6 p.m. Central. I don't know what's happening. I guess I'll shoot an email right now. I'm literally I'm typing an email to them on the air. I probably should have done this right before, but you guys, you know what? Anybody who's seen me stream on Twitch, I just live my life in front of you guys. So how's it? The weather is cold. Sorry, doggy. Hope all is well and there is no emergency. Ah, there they are. They just popped up into the waiting room. Okay, let me turn this music back down. This club music. All right. I think we may have some success here. We may have some success. Let me get this going. He's checking in. I think we have, hello? No, that's okay. I was hoping nothing happened. Let me take care of one or two things here. There we go. And here we go. Let me move over. I've just started our little stream here, but I'll move over. I was getting ready to just start drinking through these by myself. And we're just going to get into it. Hey, there we go. Yeah. All right. Everything is working now.
Excellent.
Awesome. Yeah. So, real quick, for people at home, you don't see it. So we're using two cameras. Alex, you're seeing me on my crappy phone camera because unfortunately my nice camera can't do two things at once in this brave new internet world. So the nice camera goes for the internet people, and you can see me right here.
Okay.
But, yeah, awesome. So I was just introing, saying a little hello to everybody here on the live stream. First of all, welcome. Thank you very much for being here. I'm glad. Like I said, no emergencies had happened and everything is okay, and you're alive and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, thank you so much for being here.
No, thank you for having us on. Was excited to work with you guys, with you for the Calvados barrel
yes
earlier this winter, and it's great to be back tasting through some more of the lineup. And yeah,
absolutely. No, and it's always fun to try new things. I mean, in this booming world of whiskey and everything like that. And so, just to start off, whenever I have anybody from a distillery or a company or anything on, I want to know about you. You know what I mean? Give me how
Sure.
how did you find the booze business? You know, how did it find you? So on. Give it a little bit of your background.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, to be honest, I owe it all to my co founder and good friend, Sandy Wood. He and I went to undergrad together a while back.
Okay.
Um, and yeah, I studied biology, had a 17-year career in biotech, mostly out in the San Francisco Bay Area, but also up in Columbia University and more recently in Rockville, Maryland, not far from DC here. And Sandy studied journalism and, well, he studied literature, went into a career in journalism, and came to DC to go to law school. So years later, we've reconnected in DC, and at that time, the first distillery in DC had just opened, New Columbia Distillers, but the craft boom was really underway. We were going from just a few hundred distilleries to, when we opened, maybe 500 in the nation. Now we're well over 2,000.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's getting back to how things were before that failed experiment of prohibition really did a number on things. We had 4,000 distilleries in the country back before prohibition. And yeah, we're getting back there. So Sandy had this idea. He always had wanted to be an entrepreneur. He just couldn't figure out what he wanted to do. We always enjoyed our spirits together. Some beer as well, some good wine. I had really got into cooking. Always was into it. My mother, who's actually in town now, first time I've seen her in a year. It's great to be together. We're cooking
Hell
together.
yeah.
But then I moved to San Francisco. Really got into that California cuisine idea. Start with great local ingredients. Let them just shine through to the plate. I saw that happening in brewing and winemaking there, as well as in distilling. We had St. George Spirits, Hangar One, had opened. Charbet had been around for a while. Great local craft distillers in the much earlier generation. This was back in, the 90s when I first moved there. And it was really awesome to be a part of and to check out and to enjoy the restaurants and enjoy the products. So Sandy wanted to open up a facility, and he thought of me as the distiller. So we went for it. We trained up. We looked for space. I actually spent a good week internship with Smooth Ambler out in West Virginia.
Oh yeah.
John and John, those guys are awesome. They were super generous with their time then and throughout. Whenever we have a question now, they had gone through the upgrade to a column still. So when we were considering, they were the first people we talked to. So yeah, we trained up there. I actually came to Chicago to study at the Siebel Institute, which mostly is a brewing institute, but they also have distillation courses. So I studied there, and yeah, it was just a great experience. And so yeah, we opened our doors and went for it.
So and how long ago was that? When did you guys officially open?
Yeah, so we the first time Sandy approached me was back in 2013.
Okay.
So it was the summer 2013. We started looking for space. It was about a year later with the internship at Smooth Ambler. Actually, no, I take that back. It was later that summer in 2013. And then, I was at the Siebel Institute in 2014. We began distilling. It took us a while to find the space, to set it up, to get our equipment installed. By the way, our first still and some of the other equipment did come from Chicago as well. Came from Koval.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so they were ready to upsize from the 2,000 liter system to a 5,000 liter system. So that's when we got their still and other tanks. So yeah, we began distilling at the end of 2014 and opened our doors in early 2015.
Very cool. So a scientist and a journalist
Yes.
come together to to make
Oh,
some
the
whiskey.
attorney. Yes. It's DC, so he had to be an attorney somewhere, right?
Yeah, that fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah.
So, but kind of coming back to that. So, remind me, what kind of science were you? Biology, some kind of biotech
Yeah.
or something?
Biotech. So my field where I worked was in the production level research in a field called genomics, where we're studying DNA, sequencing DNA, doing something called quantitative PCR, microarray work. It's all advanced so much since I left the industry. I wouldn't recognize it now. It was even advancing when I was in the industry because I left the bench about halfway through my career and became a lab manager. So I was sort of, I could always speak the language of the scientists from having worked at the bench. I never had my PhD. I stopped at a bachelor's. But at the same time, I was always, I was working for these startup biotechs that you had to wear a lot of hats. You had to kind of do everything, kind of like a distillery. And so I just learned how to do a lot of things. And so I could work with purchasing, I could work with finance, I could work with the facilities and whatever we needed. I could install equipment to make sure we had all that stuff working. So the lab management was kind of a natural move for me. So I would say the science side really does apply to distilling, a lot of it.
Of course.
Being able to do things reproducibly, but also just managing labs is really helpful as a
Yeah.
distiller.
Especially God, in this day and age, as distilleries become more and more advanced, there's more science, there's more technology in them. It's not grandpa on the prairie with a fire and a pot still anymore.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
yeah, it's get technology is moving so fast, even in this industry too. And so, I mean,
Sure.
coming from, I know it's biotech, but biology and stuff background, did that lend itself to like the plants and the ingredients and the art of distillation and all that, all the herbology and all that stuff that goes into distilling? Do you find that it kind of lent itself to that?
So, I mean, some of the processes, like how yeasts are, creating ethanol through fermentation, that stuff definitely, understanding the science behind that is helpful. However, more it's the just to be able to treat things properly. My first job in biotech was not glamorous. I came to San Francisco, didn't have a job lined up. I ended up at Genentech, which is a huge biotech company, still there to this day, massive campus, and I was cleaning glassware on the swing shift. So
Yeah,
I
you're like a
drove
bar back for scientists.
Exactly. That's all it was. So we would drive the van around the campus, pick up all the dirty glassware, bring it back, clean it. But you learn how to clean things for a lab. It's the same way you clean things for a distillery. You learn the methods, you learn how you should treat things. Okay, if I've cleaned with an acid today, tomorrow I'm cleaning with a base or cleaning with steam or however we're going to do it. So those things do apply definitely to distilling. And then also just the approach to distilling, the scientific approach, to be able to make a consistent flavor profile, doing things the same way, trying not to change a lot of variables at the same time, so you know what really happened, what effects do happen. So that's the real trick there for or what applies from the science side.
Sure.
But what I love about distilling is science can only get you part way. You're not going to make a great tasting spirit with science alone. You really want to stress your palate and exercise your palate, and that's the fun part for me is using both of those sides, the art and the science.
That's exactly what I was like. I'm like wondering is coming into distilling, coming from somewhere where it's probably pretty, you're regimented, you need to do exactly what you need to do. Everything is very measured out too. While there's still that science in distilling, I mean, I feel like there's got to be a little bit of like creative freedom and there's an art to it. A lot of, you're creating different flavor profiles by messing with stuff until you find your kind of signature profile. So is there some a little bit more of that creativity for you in this?
Absolutely, yeah, and that's where I really enjoy it, and that's the career I loved, but what was exciting to me in San Francisco was going to a fantastic restaurant or visiting a Anchor Steam Brewery or going up to wine country, and then cooking myself. I would come home from work, when I was young, and a great evening at home was stopping by a shop, or I had gone to the farmer's market the day before or whatever, and then spending 2-3 hours cooking a fantastic meal. That was the fun for me. And that's where what still continues to be exciting in distilling is, there's our core spirits, which I love. And we got there already as far as the palate. But on the whiskey side, it continues to be, exercising our palates when we are, blending barrels to release, let's say, the next batch of rye or the next batch of bourbon. And that's the continued exercise. And then, of course, when we're doing something new, like a new Untitled whiskey release or a new liqueur or a new gin. And that's always fun to bring on our palates. And it is absolutely not just me on the distilling and the palate side. It is a team effort. Our production team is myself and Stephen Corrigan, and that's it. It's just the two of us. But we'll bring on, we'll bring samples to the rest of the folks in the team for sampling. Let's say deciding what proof we like, or tweaking the blend of an Untitled whiskey release.
Very cool. That's awesome.
It's a great, awesome team, and we love everyone. Everyone's palate is valid, no matter who you are, and we're all different, and it's all subjective. We want to release spirits that we love as a team, and we're hearing good things about what other people think of them. So that's the great part.
Hell yeah. So those first couple of years, I'm always curious to hear from people about like what kind of, I don't know if you call them like growing pains, but figuring out maybe we started doing this and then realized, oh crap, like that's not working. Or, we started with small barrels, then we moved to big barrels. Then we started with this recipe, then we realized this recipe. Did you have a little bit of that as you were getting going?
Absolutely. Yeah. And you know what, to be honest, we always continue to have these.
Sure.
Yeah. Trying to figure out what happens with the still. Just the other day, we installed new stills over 2 years ago now, and we were never able to run them together at the same time. We had to tweak the plumbing, bring on, and it was just ideas that we had and suggestions from other folks. But in this case, one of the stills, the column still, uses a lot more cooling water by volume than the pot still. So it was not an issue of pressure coming in, but they used the same lines for the water to drain. And my theory was that the column still was taking too much water in and pushing too much water out, and the pot still couldn't push out its cooling water. It was overheating and shutting down. So these challenges, what we did, we just split the drain lines, let them not fight each other at all. And now, the stills, we can run them both at the same time, doubling our throughput, and the amount of spirits we can make.
Nice.
So yeah, early on, all kinds of challenges, all kinds of growing pains, tweaking the mash bills. We went with, too much grain early on, and things would clog up, and making sure we were milling properly. And, our heat exchanger had tubes that were really like pencil thin. So you get one kernel of corn in there, that's it, that tube's done. So learning how to clean those out, how often we had to clean them out, all kinds of fun things. But yeah, we, I love that stuff. I'm glad it's not as often, those challenges.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, I continue to enjoy the things that make it interesting. If it was the same every day, it would probably wear on us. But I also love the routine. I love getting in there. This is a few days off for me here, and I kind of miss the going in and the smells of mashing and distilling, and it's just fun throwing yourself into it every day.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, and anybody in our chat can attest. There's nothing for us whiskey dorks and walking into a distillery and smelling those fermenters going and all that stuff. There's a magic to that aroma of some kind for sure.
Absolutely.
Um, so I'm curious. Let's talk really quickly about, and maybe we can even jump into the tasting. But let's talk about Untitled for a second.
Yeah.
So Untitled is a series of batches and stuff like a lot of distilleries do. You go out and you get some whiskey from other sources for a little bit, and you do some stuff with it. A lot of people will just either fire off some single barrels, do a couple of blends of stuff of just straight bourbon, sell it to people or whatever. But you guys have been doing some really like finishing has been popular lately, but like really interesting finishes. Where did the idea, was Untitled always in the plans from the get-go? And was the
Yes.
finishing stuff always part of that? Explain how that kind of all came about.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, exactly like you're saying, a lot of distilleries that we knew of, sourced whiskey, and that was a huge part of their business. For us, of course, we knew Smooth Ambler intimately, and the entire Old Scout line was rye and bourbon, and different mash bills, different ages, and great stuff. I mean, beautiful whiskey. So we saw that, and we saw, what a great way to get a good start. Plenty of other folks were doing it, and but we saw that, and not to dismiss releasing other people's whiskey under your own label at all. There is great challenges to selecting barrels, to blending barrels, to determining the proof you want to release it at if you're not doing cask strength. There's a lot of challenges there, but we wanted one more step that was kind of our own creative stamp on the releases. So up until recently, Untitled Whiskey 18, which isn't our most recent releases. It's actually 17 is our most recent, but we'll get to that in a minute. But anyway, up until then, all of the whiskey that we released on the Untitled line had been finished in one manner or another. And when we began, it was very straightforward. Untitled Whiskey 1, Oloroso Sherry. So select barrels, blend them together, refill an Oloroso Sherry butt. They call those butts, 650, 700 liters, huge vessels. And then it was about 3.5 months in there, and that was Untitled Whiskey 1. Then we started getting more creative and crazier. Part of that is I blame Sandy. He just loves barrels, and he's like, he keeps looking for them. And we've brought in whole containers of barrels from Europe, and just we go and we play and we have fun. And then then we're like, all right, Stephen, come up with a blend. So
now you go do all the work.
Yes, yeah. So we've been filling a lot, and we don't have any more of the original casks of sourced bourbons. We do have more whiskey in finishing casks, so there will be additional releases, but not too much. We never meant for this to be a huge part of the business. It was a way for us to start, have fun, work with mature whiskey that already, was. Our last barrels were up to 14 years old, between 10 and 14 years old that we released. And it's just, a lot of fun to work with that old whiskey way before our own whiskey got to that age.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I wonder if so you said Untitled 1, 3.5 month finish or whatever like that. Did you gradually try to increase that finishing time? Because that's something I'm a big fan of finished bourbon. I know there's a lot of purists who have their thoughts on it, but I love the idea of it. I love playing with things, but I have certain opinions on I feel like it needs to be in there a certain amount of time to really get that influence. I mean, have you found that to be, because I noticed you say 3 months, but the barrel we picked, I believe, we had a 2-year Calvados finish, which that's an awesome finish, incredibly affected the whiskey. So I just wanted your thoughts on finishing time and where that kind of comes into play.
Yeah, very variable. We definitely started more tentative, and we didn't want to, overwhelm a bourbon with a lot of finish and a long time finishing. But as we began to play more and brought in more barrels, um, we realized that and our rick house in DC, we have a very traditional climate. We're starting to warm up back there. Um, I always know when it's time to warm up because I used to have an afro earlier last week, and I got rid of that real
Yeah.
quick. It's starting to get hot in the distillery. So, we get probably 50 degrees at its coldest indoors and 95 at its hottest. And so it's very traditional as far as, those temperatures. And the more we let the whiskey sit through those seasonal changes, the more it's going to impact the flavor. So letting it really warm up one season, 2 seasons, as much as 3 seasons, and then cool off and pull those flavors back into the whiskey is just really key. Of course, at the same time, we're losing to the Angel's Share, but so we're concentrating both alcohol, going up in proof, and flavor, and we love that effect more too. So we were very tentative at first, short finishes, and then longer as we've experienced and like what we get out of those longer rides.
Yeah.
We've had some, that Calvados that we are talking about is definitely one of the longer ones we've done, but some of the whiskey in 17 that we'll sample was in long finishes as well.
What is the most unique secondary barrel you guys have brought, or even maybe even tried and then said nah?
Yeah, we've enjoyed almost everything. We have some that change over time. Like we get really concerned earlier on in the finish process, but they change, and we keep sampling, and a few months later, a year later, it's revelations. I think the strangest ones we've done, we haven't released yet, Kirschwasser, so a cherry brandy, German cherry brandy. Those are wild right now.
Wow.
I suggested, it was a complete joke, we won't do this, but I suggested we should do a fruit salad finish and do a Calvados, Kirschwasser, and then some kind of cognac or brandy or
That
red
could be
wine.
good.
Yeah, it could be. You never know. But yeah, so that's definitely a fun one. But really, the ones that I get jazzed about are, in addition to bringing over these amazing barrels from Europe, I really love the collaborative ones that we do with other local makers.
Okay.
So the barrel comes from us after we empty the whiskey, the bourbon, the first time, and then we can bring it over all over the place. So in 17, we'll sample rum finishes. They were originally our bourbon barrels that then went to rum distilleries that then came back to us
Okay.
for the finish. Or we work with a chocolate maker. We're about to release batch 2 of Untitled 12. And the chocolate maker, Harper Macaw, here in DC, they'll rest the cocoa nibs or the cow nibs in the barrel. And they make a bourbon chocolate, or they make a rye chocolate. And then that's almost a year that the chocolate's in the barrel. Then they take them out, they make the chocolates, we put the whiskey in there for a year, 2 years. And yeah, just a lot of fun, and the collaboration, and we both get an amazing product at the end.
Yeah, that's very cool. Well, you know what? On that note, I'm going to reach for the Untitled, the latest, the Untitled 17.
Great. Yeah.
So, this one, I believe, I just saw a couple stores here. This just hit Chicago a couple weeks. There you go, a couple weeks ago. Got my little deal right here. And so what we're looking here on the front of it is it's a blended, of course, different bourbons, blend of 10 and 14-year-old bourbon, 115.8 proof, and the finish in a mix of Calvados, cognac, rum, and Amontillado.
Yes.
Which
yeah,
always
so
makes
one of the crazy ones where we let Stephen have at it, and he starts putting some things together.
Hell yeah. Well, cheers. Thank you very
Cheers.
much for being here. And
Of course, yeah. Sorry for the mix-up at the beginning.
Oh,
there.
please. I've learned being in the wrestling business my whole life. I've learned to fly by the seat of my pants pretty darn well. So, ooh, wow, that is
Yeah.
fascinating.
So the rum in this case, there's two local rum distilleries out in Maryland that we worked with: Lion Distilling, Lyon, and Blackwater Distilling, and then Outer Banks Distilling down North Carolina.
Okay.
So all of our, in this case, they were all bourbon barrels that they had. Some were full size 53 gallons, and some were actually smaller 25-gallon barrels that we used to use in our own bourbon.
Oh, okay. Are these wheated bourbons? Are these rye bourbons?
So in this, the whiskey that was finished is mostly wheated bourbon,
Okay.
and that was finished in all of the rum casks. The only thing that, yeah, high rye was in was the Amontillado.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you had Robert, one of our Barrel Club members in our chat, is saying finally, you know what? And I would suggest it if you guys had some more barrels left of stuff. But we here in Chicago, have you ever heard of Malort?
Oh yeah.
So I have been teasing with different people when I talk to company about Malort. It is again, most of you in the chat know, but if you don't, it's an infamously terrible tasting. I believe it's a wormwood liqueur. And the old Chicago handshake is to have that and some old style and just watch people grimace when they take the Malort down. So I've been begging someone, and I don't care if it's one barrel, you know what I mean? One barrel, we will sell it for charity and it'll raise $1 million here in Chicago, trust me. But so take Malort, unaged liqueur, put it into a fresh whiskey barrel for whatever, 6-8 months, then finish a bourbon in it and then sell that. So it's a Malort finished bourbon. I am begging someone to take the awful, awful risk of making probably the worst tasting finished whiskey in the history of mankind. But I guarantee every bottle will sell out and people would probably pay a lot of money for it in this in this city for sure. So if with your last couple of little ounces of product, if you ever want to try something stupid, give me a call. I'll make it happen. That's all I want to say.
Yeah, well, I mean, the guys at CH are making it, right?
They are indeed.
They took over, so we've crossed paths before. I love what they're doing. So yeah, I'll see what they have.
Hear that, chat? So you're saying there's a chance, but
we also have a fantastic Italian liqueur and Amaro and aperitivo maker across the street from us in DC. So
there you go.
I might a little more readily get one of his.
Sure, yeah, a little easier.
But it's not quite the Malort experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. We had an.
Sorry, I keep interrupting you because I just keep tasting things, which is good. No, there's like all from those casts, and very like fruit forward casts for a lot of those things. But and the nose is super fruity, but the palate, at least on the initial sip here, I'm getting like chocolatey kind of notes. As weird as it sounds, I don't know if that's just me today. You know what I mean?
Right. Of course, all of our palates are different. Time of day, different days. What's going on? But yeah, I mean, the rum contributes a lot. I think you get some sweetness, some molasses. Yeah.
There's definitely some of that rum influence for sure. Mm-hmm. And that's my so for the proof, when you do a big blend like this, I'm not sure if all these is this like batch proof, or do you proof it to this? Did you proof it down to this?
Yes, slightly under.
Okay.
Not a lot. It didn't come down much. The overall blend, I couldn't tell you where it was between all of the barrels. Some of the whiskey barrels, the finish, I mean, some of the barrels with the rum finish were smaller casks, and those had really climbed over time. Some of the larger casks, like Amontillado, these sherry butts, the cognac were huge. And those didn't go up as much over time in the finish. We're not losing as much water to evaporation. So yeah, this one, with all of the Untitles, we really taste it at cask strength all the way down to 80. Maybe not all the way down to 80.
Sure.
An idea that we know we're not going to like it below maybe 90. But sometimes we do. We have released and we'll continue to release some in the 80s. It's just because that's where we like it. It's really all about, of course, if I released all of these at 80 proof, I could fill more bottles and make a few more bucks. But that's, this one especially, we liked it nowhere near 80. It was interesting, and I highly recommend always if you have a dropper of water, add a few drops.
Sure.
See what happens, because it's going to change. Add a few more drops. There you go. Yeah, I mean, just because we liked it at 57.9%,
right,
doesn't mean everyone will.
Absolutely.
Yep. I never tell people how to drink whiskey. I do have recommendations for sampling and tasting. Room temp, right out of the bottle, neat. Of course, that's how it should be. But you want to drink it on the rocks? Hey, go for it. I'm not going to tell you what to do. But sampling, I think really, you start cooling it with ice, you're going to dull the palate. That's all there is to it.
100%.
Yeah.
But I do. It's funny. I just did an interview with a friend of mine, and his first thing, because he's not a whiskey drinker, but that was kind of the fun of the interview. And one of the first things he told me, he's like, "So you're telling me you drink this stuff warm?" Or for what he meant was room temperature. I was like, yeah, with no ice, no nothing in it. I'm like, well, yeah, if I want to know what it tastes like. He's like, I don't get it. I'm like, you will. Just stick with me.
Yeah.
No, this is fantastic, though.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we had previously, and it was also in Chicago, and there may still be some bottles around. Untitled Whiskey 11 is also a big blend at a high proof and more of the weeded bourbon like this one as well. And the idea was to come up with something that kind of could fill its shoes, a release that could, had the proof, had that weeded bourbon, that underlying, some of those barrels were, really fun. I loved this underlying, I mean, we're putting all these layers with the finishes, so it does change the bourbon. But the original bourbon, some of the barrels have this this farmhouse funk that I love. I mean, it's really awesome. It can be a little over the top sometimes, but it's something you get. Comes through distillation, comes into our barrels. Same as you can get a type of beer that might have that thing going on. But yeah, I love it in 11, and I love it in this as well.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I'm gonna impromptu. It's right here. I'm gonna do a little. This is our selection. If anybody from our barrel club, I don't have an extra glass, so I'm just gonna take a little. I'm just gonna do a little.
Yeah. Of course.
Not to put you on the spot, but I mean, either way, it's your product, so you win-win, right? Yeah. All right.
Maybe I might have a little back here.
Ooh.
You'll excuse me for a quick sec.
Yes, indeed.
Just
please.
Across the room.
This is 2 times this week, you guys, that I swear I never drink out of the bottle, and then I drank out of the bottle because Grease got me to drink out of the bottle, and now because I don't have an extra glass. Cheers, everybody in the chat, by the way. Thank you guys for hanging out. If you've got your 1-8 pick at home, pick it out.
Matt, I killed it.
Did you really?
Yeah. It's good.
Well, there's your verdict then, I suppose. But
yeah, that was a great pick. That Calvados is so fun.
It's fascinating to me. That's why I didn't know what it was at first. I was like, is this, it sounded like Spanish. I'm like, is this a tequila barrel or something? And No, and then I looked it up and everything because I've had one or two brandy finishes, and they were very nice and everything like that, but nothing like this. This is has there is I don't know if it's not the farmhouse funk you're talking about, but there is this kind of like funky, layered, fruity floral thing going on in here that I don't get in other brandied finished bourbons or whiskeys. So it is a very interesting, very specific kind of brandy, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the Calvados it's only made in Normandy. Not even all of France, and it's something we love at the distillery. I haven't had too much of it, but my the other guy that in production, Steven, and I, he's a huge fan. He actually traveled to Normandy and visited I don't know how many Calvados makers and brought back a bunch, and it's lovely stuff. It's not like regular apple brandy, that's for sure.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
100%. Well, of course, awesome stuff doing with that Untitled series, which is all fantastic. But as we alluded to earlier, you get in the whiskey, into the whiskey game to make your own stuff, ultimately, of course. So let's start talking a little bit about District Made.
Sure. Absolutely. So yeah, District Made, our core lineup. We have vodka, gin, aged gin, rye, and bourbon. And we've also released only at the distillery so far, and they've moved pretty quickly. Bottled in bond, rye and bourbon, just single casks.
Hell yeah.
As well as a cask strength of our rye. So we'll continue to do smaller releases, either bottled in bond or cask strength of the bourbons and ryes. And then also some more whiskeys down the road. We have more things that we've made. So when we're making our own juice, whether it's vodka, gin, or the whiskey, it's all from local grain. We're not, working with large commodity growers. We know our farmers by name. We love to visit the farm. We're distilling our own base for the gin and the vodka. We're not, starting with NGS for that. What it comes down to here in the Mid-Atlantic, there's a lovely history of distilling rye. First as rye whiskey, but now we're seeing, we're doing rye in our vodka and our gin as well. So we love that history. It's what the colonists brought over from Europe. It's what they were first distilling. I think there's a story of the English colonists when they first came to the States. They built a church. The German colonists, they first built a barn, and the Scottish and the Irish colonists, they first built a still.
Sounds about right.
I don't want to, this is just something I heard. But anyway, and it's all people were distilling here. They were distilling. They moved to the Appalachians. There was moonshine. There was whiskey. There was all kinds of things happening. Our first president, he after his term in office, his farmhands from Scotland convinced him that he could make more money distilling than he was. He was already growing grain. He was milling it, and the flour was being sold back to Europe mostly. You get a better price for it there. And they convinced him to keep it. And they built this distillery at Mount Vernon. It was awesome. It was the largest distillery in just a couple of years in the entire nation. They were making rye whiskey mostly and brandy. And we love that history of rye. Unfortunately, it burned down to the ground, but it brought it back about, 10, 12 years ago now. So you can go check it out.
I feel like it's almost like a me. I feel like there's so many distillery stories about like old brands, like, oh, they had this whole thing and then it burned to the ground. Yeah. How many distilleries burn? It's not a funny thing, but it seems to just be like this old tale. I don't know how many times I've heard the distillery burned down, and then it's, everybody's resurrecting them, all these old brands and distilleries now. It's just, It's like this pattern you always see. That's fascinating. But no, that is true. So it's funny. You say local, but you're also, you're in DC, which is, it's the little district right between.
Yep.
So where's local? Is there some from Maryland, some from Virginia, kind of, but all within a pretty small radius, I imagine.
Exactly. Yeah. So we're now working primarily with three farms. One in Maryland, out on the eastern shore of Maryland, in Chestertown, beautiful farm there called Land's End, all organic. And then we work with two farms in Virginia. We work with Fairview Cattle and Grain out in Culpeper. Craig's our farmer there. He uses organic practices, but he's not certified. And lastly, we've been starting to work with Keen Bell Farm closer to Richmond, Virginia, a little further south. And again, 100% organic. He and his CJ is our farmer and his dad. So family farm, love those guys. And we're getting in rye mostly from Fairview. We were getting it from Land's End, but it's a pretty small farm and we're using a lot of rye. Then the second grain of note that we really love is a corn varietal called Hickory King. And we're getting that from all three farms. And again, we love our history. We're kind of history buffs in this way. When you go back in the history of bourbon, now, of course, most bourbon's being made from a very glamorous varietal of corn called Yellow Dent #2. It doesn't sound very exciting, and it isn't. And a lot of it's GMO, and it is what it is. But that's what most of our bourbon's made from. But back in the day, you were making bourbon from the corn that the farmers were growing near you, and you were making bourbon in Kentucky and Tennessee in the South. And what corn were you growing? You were growing white kerneled corn for hominy and grits. And so that's the corn you were using. And there were varietals like we use the Hickory King. It's a white kerneled corn that we love. It's not as sweet coming off the still. When we first tried it, the White Dog was a little drier on the palate, but it had a creaminess, had a richness to it that we just loved. And that's become the corn for our bourbon.
Okay. Any plans to, I don't know how it grows down there, but any plans to introduce wheat potentially at some point?
Absolutely, yes. So we have, and we do distill with wheat. So
Okay.
I'm going to skip all over the place here, but talking grains, we use a couple of varietals of wheat. One is called Redeemer. Generally, they're red winter wheats that we've used, coming from both Land's End Farm in Maryland and Keen Bell Farm down in Richmond. And we love that. And the last main ingredient is the malt. And we just keep playing. We work with a great malt house down in Asheville, North Carolina, called Riverbend. And it's the furthest afield of all of our sources of our grains. But those folks are just doing things great, and they've grown a lot. And so we use two varieties of malted barley, more traditional, as well as malted wheat, as well as malted rye, a lot of malted rye. And that's become really our signature ingredient, is that malted rye. It's in almost all the spirits we've made. Well, we've released, it is in all the spirits. Actually, yes, no, that's true. But we have played even more, and there's a lot in the future, but I don't want to get ahead of ourselves.
Sure, absolutely.
There's other grains that we love to continue to play with.
Awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, the district made, I would say rye really underlines most of the things, and the malted rye.
Okay.
Really, yeah.
So yeah, well then let's dive into these. I mean, what order do you when you're tasting these people, what order do you usually like to go in?
Well, we've already started with whiskey, so I think we should stay with the whiskeys.
Okay.
First, and then we'll finish with the gin.
All right, sounds good to me.
Normally, I would do the gin first, cleanse the palate, and then whiskey of all. But we're on that whiskey road already, so
sure,
let's do that. I'd say let's go bourbon, since we already were on a bourbon.
Love it.
So district made, straight bourbon whiskey. Early on, we did use some of the small casks. The last several batches have all been coming out of 53-gallon barrels.
Okay.
Started as a 2-year, straight on the label, and has aged over time. So we're probably averaged close to 3.5 years in this particular batch. As far as the blend goes, So we do make both wheated and high rye bourbons. Distill them separately, age them separately, and then after the fact we blend.
Mm.
We like it was just one of those things that again I'm going to mention Stephen. He's our mad genius here. I think when we were first trying to release the bourbon, we were thinking, well, is it going to be high rye? Is it going to be wheated? And then I think he just did one of these one day, and there we go. So of course we've tweaked the blend a bit more since then. But we have our bourbon basically is a 4 grain now.
I was gonna say, interesting. Is there a reason you chose not to, because on the label it's just straight bourbon, which you can put, but many companies that do have a 4 grain choose this, hey, look, this is our 4 grain. Any reason for not, going that route?
I think just to give us flexibility down the road, were we to consider changing to one or the other. We love the blend of both now, but who knows down the road.
Yeah, no.
So yeah, I mean, as a small craft distillery, we love to play and we love to do things different. There's a lot of great bourbon coming out of Kentucky and elsewhere. Why make one like that? Why not do things differently? So like I mentioned, we love the malts coming from Riverbend Malt House. So we're really heavy on the malt, upwards 18%.
Of the malted rye?
Well, in the high rye, it is malted rye.
Gotcha. Okay.
And in wheated, we use malted barley.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So it's a 2-row heritage, they call it, that particular malt. It's got some nice, a little bit heavier, not quite that. They also do other like more Pilsner or pale malts. This is a little bit heavier malt. Not a chocolate or anything like that.
Sure. And now, do you guys use sweet mash or sour mash?
Sweet mash. I do appreciate some of the things that you can do with the sour mash. You get more consistent pH for your yeast. Again, a little bit of science geek in me. We have to do that by adding citric acid. It's not going to add any flavor. It's not going to do much. I mean, it's a tiny amount in 1,000-gallon mash. It's
Sure.
adding 2 pounds of citric acid. It's not a lot. But if you use a sour mash, you don't need that. You also are going to probably achieve a little bit greater consistency of fermentation batch to batch with the sour mash process. But we're an urban distillery. We have some space, but we do have some constraints, and working a sour mash gets to be a messy process because you're basically dumping things out of your still and putting it in your next mash tun and reserving tanks to do that. And anyway, we just decided to stick with the sweet mash process.
Gotcha. Yeah. So this bourbon, this is made with the white corn you were talking about?
Yeah. So the hickory cane corn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm getting. I was gonna say there is this creaminess that almost gives it like a viscosity that I usually don't get unless it's like a higher proof, like over 100 proof kind of whiskey. There is this nice body to it, which to me is something that's big. I love, because I used to love, I guess I still do, but like I used to be barrel proof or bust kind of guy, right? Like sure. If it's not cask strength, don't give it to me sort of thing. But I've really come to like and enjoy the more subtleties at lower proofs, but I do like a nice body on it. When it gets too thin, it starts to bug me. But so it's nice when you get something in the 90s that has this really nice body creaminess to it that you can really chew on. And that, from what your description, that corn adds a little bit of that to it.
Yep, absolutely. And again, going higher in the malt, I really think.
As well, yes.
Yeah. It's just a lot of fun to play with that. So the wheat whiskey is traditional in the mash bill elements, but the proportion of malt is higher than most. Not all, but higher than a lot. And pretty solid on the wheat as well. About 57% is corn in this mash bill.
Gotcha.
And then in the high rye, it's the same percentages. It's just subbing rye for the wheat and subbing malted rye for the malted barley.
Gotcha. Very
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah. So,
speaking of rye, let's move on to the rye.
all right. So yeah, this bourbon. Speaking, we were talking about the Malort handshake.
Yeah.
For a while at the bar, our handshake was half our bourbon and half an Amaro that Angostura makes. So we called it the 50-50, and that was the handshake at the bar. It was a fun cocktail.
Hell yeah. Actually, speaking of the bar, one of our people in the chat wanted to know, are there any, I'm not sure if you already have one, or are there any plans to add an on-site tasting room or cocktail lounge to 1-8?
We do have that, yeah.
Okay.
We haven't been open in a long time, unfortunately, with everything that's gone on. We just decided, part of it is, the city's only allowed such a small percentage customers out of your capacity, and it's just really tough to keep people employed and not bringing in that much. So when we are able to bring in more people, we certainly hope to reopen. But we are going to reopen we are building out a lovely cocktail garden in our very urban setting. But yeah, no, we're really excited because we've missed that energy a lot. I love doing these. I can't believe we never did Zoom tastings or whatever before this. This has been a great way. Here I am talking with you in Chicago, and everyone else that's watching for wherever they are. Why didn't we do this before?
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, I was with this group last week, Bourbon Alliance, and there was someone from Baltimore, and there was someone from North Carolina and Louisiana and Detroit, and it was great. It was really just a lot of fun. So I'm glad about that, but I miss the energy of having people on site. So we do have a tasting room that was open every weekend, and we will get back there.
Very cool.
Yeah, and just having bartenders that work just with our spirits and design cocktails, it's great. And there's plenty of other great bars around the area that do it, and we love that. But that's what our folks do all the time, is just cocktail with our spirits and just tweak things. Like, who knew that a 50-50 with this Angostura Amaro would be the drink?
Yeah,
would be the handshake.
And yet there it is. Very cool.
Yeah.
As we pour the rye here, so you're an urban distillery. There's not a ton of those. So again, I guess same kind of question with the farm. You have your distilleries in the district. Is your rick house in the district as well, or is that outside?
Yeah, so same building.
Okay.
We were lucky to find, DC is not an industrial city. That we don't have these neighborhoods like you find in a lot of cities that have all these warehouses and great spaces for, there are a few. And our neighborhood and this sort of corridor on the eastern side of the city, you go a little bit further north and a little bit further south of us, and you find almost all of the breweries, cideries, wineries, distilleries in the district. And our neighborhood is called Ivy City. It's kind of like the DC's liquor cabinet. We have 4 other distilleries within a little bit, a couple of breweries, cidery, winery. So we're really, it's because there's spaces like that there. So yeah, we're fortunate to have found a building with enough space we're now north of 1,000 barrels that we've laid down. We probably will fill it and need to find new space. And it may be the case that we have to move outside the city just to find a more affordable spot, but not far. We'll keep things close. Yeah.
No, but like I said, I mean, it's a thing, but it's a good problem to have. Hoping one of these days is if you have to go looking for a big space it just means you're doing something right and you're laying more stuff down. So
yeah. Hey, we've got to feed Chicago, to be perfectly honest. Man,
please,
that city is thirsty.
You don't know the half of it.
Yeah, actually, my brother's up in Evanston, so I've had great occasions to come out, and I cannot wait to come back out once this all blows down.
Yes.
blows over, we can. I can't wait to get there because, well, first of all, see him and some of my favorite establishments. Why am I blanking now on the great punk rock whiskey bar?
Delilah's?
Delilah's, thank you.
Oh,
I've had a
yeah.
couple of dangerous nights at Delilah's.
sounds about right.
Yeah, yeah, and some phenomenal whiskey. The whiskey collection there is just so great.
Ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's outstanding.
and, yeah. So I'm looking forward to getting back to Chicago and yeah, yeah. So
Very cool.
I
Yeah.
don't know. Have you already poured the rye?
I have that in front of me.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right, I'm with you now. So district made straight rye whiskey. By the way, the bourbon was 95 proof. The rye is at 94. Again, it's just where we like it. The rye is, I think, a very different mash bill. Excuse me. We went high on the malt with the bourbon. We went way higher with the rye. It's 28%, over 28% malted rye. There's also perhaps a controversial term in the in Maryland style rye versus Pennsylvania or Monongahela style rye. Different meanings to different people. I'm not going to say what's right or wrong. What I take it as, Maryland style, is a rye with corn in the mash bill. You start up north in Pennsylvania, it's all rye, maybe 5% malted barley in the mash bill. That's very traditional. Come down to Maryland, a little bit of corn. Go a little further south and west, bourbon. All corn.
Touche.
Yeah, that's how I take it. So ours is Maryland style. We like a little corn in the mash bill, a little added sweetness, and again, super high on that malt. It's just we love that malted rye.
Absolutely.
And we are still emptying the last of our small casks for the rye. The bourbon we had stopped a little sooner than on the rye. We haven't filled a small barrel of rye for almost 2 years. So I have a few more left to empty, and then we'll move on. We liked the impact of the small cask rye more than in the small cask bourbon. And that's why we continued to do it longer. But ultimately, we've gotten to a point now that, we have barrels that are over 5 years, over 6 years old. And I love the effect that you get in the small cask, but I never wanted to leave whiskey in a small barrel for longer than 2 years for us.
Sure.
That's my take. I think you get too much oak extraction if you leave it in too long. And when I'm talking small cask for us, that meant 25 or 30 gallon barrels. We never went smaller than that. Certainly distilleries that do, 10, 5, even smaller gallon barrels. And I think you run into the risk of getting just too much oak extraction, too many tannin and tougher astringent flavors.
Yeah.
So it was a great way for us to start. And we had definitely enjoyed the flavor more in the rye. But I'm also glad that we are going to move on to full size like we did with the bourbon.
So from this release here, are these still from the smaller barrels?
It's always been a blend of full size and small, even when it was young. But the full size barrels are now, of course, getting much older in the blend. Probably, I don't know offhand, but probably in the 3 to 4 year range for the full size barrels. But again, those those 25 or 30 gallon barrels were 2 year.
And that's something that I'm really exploring. I came into this whole hobby, this whole world, bourbon. But seeing the absolute, and you talk, whether it's small barrels, whether it's young, rye is so damn adaptable and resilient. I feel like bourbon's a little finicky. And, and I feel like it's a little temperamental. It's got to be in the right places, for the right amount of time. But rye, small barrel, big barrel, 2 years old, 20 years old. Like, it seems to work at a lot of different catch points. I know it's tough. I've heard from a lot of this. It's tough to work with a little bit.
Yes.
It's gummy, it's sticky, it's rough, but it does seem to hold up to a lot of things in the process and in the aging and everything like that, to just where it can flourish in almost a lot more environments.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, our first product, other than our vodka, was an unaged rye. We had a whiskey. We called it Rock Creek. It's a park and a creek in town here. Rock Creek White Whiskey, and it was even a higher percentage of malt, and there was no corn in the mash bill. It was 40% malt and 60% raw grain, and it was delightful. I mean, was it a big seller? Never. But we had bartenders around town that loved to work with it. I love to make different drinks with it. So even as an unaged spirit, the rye is a lot of fun. Even distilled, to whiskey proof, under 160. And, and then, yeah, of course, the more age, more fun. We released over a 5-year-old single cask at 132 proof. It came out. And that was amazing and dangerous. It didn't drink like it was 132,
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we love that rye.
No, well, this rye is pretty fantastic too. How much malt is in this one?
Over 28%.
Yeah, that has a really
rye.
strong influence.
Yeah,
for
so,
sure.
A lot of younger ryes I feel can give you grassy notes or
Yep.
dill notes. Of course, the rye spice, that spice box, right? That really comes through in a lot of our spirits. But yeah, it's very pronounced. But I don't get that grassy or dill. Not that it's a negative. It's just not as much prevalent in ours. And I think it's attributed so much to the malt, the use of corn as well. But the malt really, I mean, it brings these biscuit notes, this kind of toasted quality, and I just love it. I mean, it's a fun grain to work with. You did mention all of the difficulties that can be present, but we've learned how to work with it. And right now we work with a varietal. It's called a Abruzzi rye. Down the road, I would love to play with more. I have a farmer that we just brought some in, also Abruzzi, but he's planting some called Danko. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Danko. And I know of its use in Europe in distilling, and just, can't wait to play with new things. Yeah.
Hell yeah. Well, yeah, you hit it on that. I mean, for a relatively younger rye, there's definitely I get the big like these like herbal, like flowery notes from rye. That's what I always pick up on. And when they are sometimes younger, especially what it's funny because you say you use a sweet mash for your whiskeys, and usually between when it's younger and it's sweet mash, I get like grain bomb, like grassy grain bomb. And this is very nicely done. I do get the herbal notes, but yeah, there's not the grass, there's not the dill, and there's again that creaminess kind of, which I think again is attributed to the malt. It's a really nice example of a rye.
No, thank you. Yeah. It's a probably the house favorite.
Yeah,
we love our bourbon. Don't get us wrong, and the handshake is a bourbon. But our sales guy John, I don't think he's allowed to bring home a bottle anymore. It has to stay out with his sample case in the car. Yeah, it's fun stuff. I love drinking it neat. I love making classic cocktails with it. I'm a little lazy at home, so simple cocktails like an old fashioned, like a Manhattan. Of course they work with bourbon, but these are classics that date before the Prohibition, and rye reigned supreme then. And they were designed for rye, so I will never turn down a good bourbon, Manhattan or old fashioned. Don't get me wrong, but this was the original spirit that was called for.
yes, absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree. Well, before we wrap that up, speaking of herbal notes, let's try this barrel aged gin.
Sure.
I'm very
Yeah.
curious about it. What so barrel aged gin. What kind of barrel are we resting this in? Is this a fresh barrel? Is this a bourbon barrel, rye barrel, so on and so forth?
Yeah. So it's a fun process for us. We began. I don't have a labeled bottle of it. I was running all over the house. I enjoy it too much, really. So this is our standard gin, clear spirit, the district made Ivy City gin. Oh, you have one. All right.
Yes.
Good. That's a barrel rested right there.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, it took us about 6 months to working my other assistant distiller at the time, this guy Max, awesome dude, had been making vodka up in Brooklyn and now is up at Sagamore in Baltimore making rye. Yeah, great guy. I'm still in touch with him, emailing just this week. So we knew what we wanted in our gin. We knew we were going to make a rye base, and we wanted to complement that rye base with botanicals. So step one to the barrel gin was making the gin. So we brought up a selection of botanicals, and as I was looking at these botanicals, I was thinking, okay, we're getting our juniper from northern Italy, we're getting our lemongrass from Southeast Asia, and our coriander is coming from, I don't even know where the coriander came from. Anyway, I wanted something local. I wanted something from the States. Of course, lemon peel comes from the States as well. But we found something called Appalachian Allspice. Grows native all over the eastern U.S., anywhere east of the Mississippi. We love the berries, and brought it in, and it became the signature botanical in our gin. So very high, on the Appalachian Allspice. There's also the coriander I mentioned, grains of paradise, fennel seed, some rounding roots, licorice root, orris root, angelica root, lemongrass for a little additional citrus, and that might be everything there. Anyway, took us about 6 months to get it. We love it. It's a fun gin, and then we wanted to play with it and make more gins. And the easiest thing for us is, all right, we're making whiskey. We're emptying whiskey barrels. Let's see. So the first barrel rested gin we did was only in ex-bourbon barrels, and we loved it. That was Untitled Gin #1. Untitled, not just for the whiskeys, is more of our experimental playground. Untitled Gin 2, we did about, I guess it's about 2/3 in New Oak and 1/3 in ex-bourbon, and that became the district made barrel rested gin.
Okay.
So it wasn't just the same recipe of botanicals as Ivy City Gin. Our approach was we knew we were going to bring in more flavors from the barrel, both new oak and bourbon, and we wanted to balance it. We wanted to continue to make this a strong gin flavor, but gain from the barrel. So we bumped up the juniper, we bumped up the fennel, we added orange peel in addition to the lemon peel, add a little more sweetness also from the orange peel in our gin. And then, coming off our still, it comes off at a pretty good proof. We come off at about, somewhere between 145 and 155. And we go into the barrels at that proof. We don't have the same laws with barrel gins as we do with whiskey. We have to go under 125 for bourbon and rye. We don't have to. So go in at a high proof, and you're going to extract a lot quicker at a higher proof. So 6 months in those barrels, that's all we need. And we continue to play. We did a gin in a Calvados barrel.
Okay.
That was a fun one. Untitled Gin #3. Long gone, but maybe we'll do it again. We're bringing in some more barrels. But yeah, so really this one becomes the whiskey lover's gin. We're getting, it's still a gin, definitely still getting juniper, still getting the other botanicals, but so much barrel influence in just 6 months.
Yeah. I love to nose gin. Like, I'm not much of a gin drinker, at least not any. I love gin cocktails. But nosing gin just with all those botanicals is always fascinating. This is very good.
Yeah. No, thank you. Yeah, it's a fun gin. Gin is one of those spirits that, unlike whiskey, we're not used to drinking neat, straight. I never drank gin before coming to the distilling world that wasn't in a cocktail. At least a gin tonic or gin and juice, something.
Yeah. That is sweet.
Yes. We
Like,
don't add anything to our spirits. We don't add any caramel. We don't add any sugar. This is
whoa.
all just
Like,
natural from the oak or sweetness. We get wood sugars, right, that are caramelized in the charring of a barrel. We also get, I think, a sweetness from the orange peel. The orange gives a nice natural sweet.
that's gotta be because like I've had a couple barrel aged gins, and usually it's kind of like gin. It's still kind of very bitter on the palate and stuff like that. But the barrel adds a little bit of like vanillas and caramels. But
Yep.
this brings like, and maybe it is the orange. It almost tastes like a pre-batch cocktail, like in a spirit. Like
Right.
that's like you wouldn't have to do much with that to make a
No.
really nice cocktail.
Yeah. No. I mean, one of my favorite ways to cocktail with it is an old fashioned. To be honest, you can sub in for whiskey
Oh,
a drop of simple syrup and a little bit of bitters. And I like maybe it's the rye and the rye malts that are in all of our spirits, but I love the combination of aromatic and orange bitters in a lot of my cocktails, Manhattans, old fashions. I even put orange bitters in a martini. Um, but yeah, I love that. And that's all I do. Now, if you're a Negroni fan, this is the best damn Negroni gin you'll ever get. It really does play so well with sweet vermouth and a nice, if you want to go classic Campari or some other local friends who are making a great aperitivo or amaro.
yeah, absolutely. Well, I might try that gin old fashioned with this tonight. That sounds actually really interesting. Hell yeah.
Yeah. So, this is definitely one of our more well-reviewed and awarded spirits. Our spirits have been out there for a little bit, and we've gotten some great reviews on the rye. Whiskey Advocate did a nice job with it. American Whiskey Magazine, Peggy Stevens. I mean, she's bourbon royalty. She's in
Oh
the
yeah.
Bourbon Hall of Fame. I haven't met her personally. I can't wait to.
She's a sweetheart. You'll love
Yeah.
her.
Oh yeah. So she loves our rye. And when it comes to this barrel gin, as Untitled Gin #2, it won Best in Class. It won double golds, and then most recently it was reviewed in the Beverage Tasting Institute and tastings.com. Anyway, it got a 96-point score, which is a platinum medal. It's beyond double gold. The highest they've rated any gin was 97. So it's up there. It's the barrel gin of 2020, according to them.
Hell yeah.
So yeah,
You'll love to see it.
yeah. So it's a fun one. I love what we've done with the base spirits, the mash bills, the proof decisions, how we distill it. And then I love the barrel, and the barrel is the piece that it's Mother Nature. We can work with a great cooperage. We can have them build the barrels of, oak that is aged for 18 months and, dry age before it's used, before they make staves from, or I mean, the staves are dry aged before they assemble the barrel. Great cooperages, that's great. But you're also just kind of rolling the dice. And I love that. I love that in our whiskeys. And I love that in this gin.
Absolutely.
And, yeah, and just letting it go. And it does mean for us as a small craft distillery. I mean, our size, our batch size for bourbon or rye is usually 5-6 barrels. That's it. That would be considered a very small batch, and that's our normal batch. And the gin, it's like 3 barrels. That's it. So there's going to be some variable, and batch to batch, and I think that's part of the fun in a craft distillery, in the invention, and you taste the changes, and of course, I throw that on Steven every time, like, all right, make this taste exactly the same as the last time, and I don't say that, but he strives at it and he works at it, and it's I think achieves that a lot of the time. The clear spirits, it's straightforward with our gin, with our vodka. We're there. with the rye, with that, and the bourbon, and the barrel gin, with only using a few barrels. I love that challenge, and and a little bit of the variation is fun.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what makes it so cool. It's funny that you say that, because that's my favorite thing about whiskey is, like, no matter how advanced we get, you can have all the machinated, automated distillery. You can have it down to a perfect science, all this stuff. But at some point, you got to throw it in a barrel and let Mother Nature take its course. You know what I mean? At some point, you just let it go, and what happens happens, and you hope you kind of roll the dice and hope for the best. But it's such a fun process for sure. Well, Alex, thank you so much for being here and walking us through all of this, from the Untitled to the District Made and everything like that. Appreciate you getting into the science. I know there's a couple of us nerds in this chat who love the nitty gritty on that stuff. I really enjoy seeing that kind of stuff. So thank you for your time, man, and I appreciate you being here.
Oh, no, thank you, Matt. Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, I enjoyed watching. An episode. It was actually a vodka distilling night, so I was at the distillery late. So it was great that I had something to do and sip on a little of the barrel, the Calvados barrel that you had picked. That was the last of it. Yeah, maybe now that I think of it, I left it at work. Oh, that's a shame. I hope it's still there. Anyway, maybe I didn't kill it at home. But anyway, but yeah, no, it was a pleasure tonight. Again, I apologize for the late start there. But yeah, thanks so much, and thanks for tasting through the lineup. I know it's a lot of spirits to get through on.
You don't know me then.
Wednesday night. Oh no.
I'm just getting warmed up. I'm about to dive into a couple of barrel proofs. So I'm kidding, awesome. But no, absolutely. Everybody, please check out 1-8 Distilling. I put Alex's handle right under his name there, 1-8 Distiller, as well as 1-8 Distilling on all the social medias and stuff like that. A lot of these have hit Chicago. Untitled has just hit Chicago, but check your local markets for when they will. Alex, if you yes, in Chicago. There you go. District Made is as well. Absolutely. Yeah, Alex, hang on for a second. I'm going to close out the show, but I'll come back to you.
All right. Cheers.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining me tonight. Absolutely. Another Wrestling with Whiskey Weekly. One more time before we go, a quick shout out to the Barrel Club. There it is. You know the deal. Barrel Club, 2 tiers. Join us. You can help us select barrels like that 1-8 Untitled Whiskey that we did. Fantastic. That was one of our first ones that we got to do as a group. It's a ton of fun to do. And yeah, you guys can join us for things like that, or even be on an episode of this if you join Tier 2. Here are some of those who have joined that Tier 2 patron. Thank you to them. As always, they are the backbone of the Wrestling with Whiskey community. I appreciate each and every one of you. But until next week, ladies and germs, always be trying new things, craft distilleries, gins. There are things besides whiskey, folks. I know it's hard to understand, but they are out there. Trust me, and they're good. So give them a go, and always, always, always be wrestling with whiskey. I will see you guys next week. Peace. And of course, my button doesn't work. Of course not. Ah! Oh, did I get rid of my thing? That's why. All right, guys. Well, I'm just going to have to say goodbye then, because I apparently deleted my little thing that says, thanks for watching.